A recent survey of senior technology and industry representatives uncovers the need for companies to divest themselves of day-to-day IT maintenance and to focus on strategic IT initiatives instead. Joining us to talk more about the results of this survey and the managed services market in Canada is Ash Mathur, Regional Vice President and Managing Director at CenturyLink Canada.
Why do this at all? Why even look at managed services? As I indicated, it's really a way for organizations to simplify their operations and really outsource the lower value sort of things that don't add direct value to their business.
CenturyLink recently commissioned a survey that gives a better understanding and overview of the managed services market in Canada and how companies need to move to managed services instead to mitigate outages and loss of productivity. Hi Ash, welcome to WRLWND Radio.
Hi, pleasure to be here.
Right, so let's begin with your recent survey of managed services in Canada. Can you share with our listeners some background information on this survey and how would you define a managed service provider?
Yeah, absolutely. So the background is that CenturyLink commissioned the Branham Group to really conduct a survey of the managed hosting marketplace, managed services marketplace in Canada, really to assess and validate our knowledge of the market and really to ensure that our offerings were going to continue to meet the needs of Canadian customers. And what we found really was that it indeed did validate that companies today are facing a whole host of issues around managing and maintaining their IT infrastructures, and that the pace of change in the industry is very, very high, and they need to simplify their operations so that they can focus on their business and innovate and continue to serve their business stakeholders. So managed hosting or managed services really is a way for a company to turn to a managed services provider such as CenturyLink to really help them to manage and maintain their infrastructure and operations.
Can you define a managed service provider? What do you mean by that?
Well, it's a company such as ours who would offer a suite of services that help to take over the infrastructure and operations of the IT systems required to run a company, and that typically is storage, network, servers, compute, and it can go up the stack, if you will, to operating systems and even applications. So, for example, that's something that we do on a daily basis is the infrastructure, including server storage network, and then we, operating system management and all the patches and updates and making sure that that's working well is something we do on a day-to-day basis. And we're also moving up the stack, if you will, to the application space. So managing SAP systems, for example, and running them for companies so that companies can then relieve the requirements on their staff. So they don't need to find the skilled staff to, whether it's the application skills or security skills or infrastructure skills, finding and keeping those folks on staff and then freeing up the time for the folks who are on staff to do more productive things with their time, to deliver the applications to serve their business. So really taking on the sort of, quote, lower value work to someone who does this on a day-to-day business so that they can focus on what they do best.
So you've basically given us some pros there. Can you highlight, if you do have some more pros, and some of the cons for moving to this managed services?
Yeah, so some of the considerations that companies need to do to take into account really is, why do this at all? Why even look at managed services? As I indicated, it's really a way for organizations to simplify their operations and really outsource the lower value sort of things that don't add direct value to their business. So that's why do it, right? And to be able to be focused on their core business and free up people time and increase productivity. Some of the items for consideration is how much they do and who they go to and how do they manage that. So, for example, Now, 80% of companies surveyed in the Branham Group survey said that they'd prefer to have a small team in IT that manages an outsourcing relationship with a managed services provider. So it's really making sure that they don't 100% outsource all responsibility, but that they make sure that the managed services provider acts as an extension of their team, and that's what we do at CenturyLink. We act as an extension of the IT environment for our customers that we serve.
You've just touched on productivity there. I know productivity is critical for any business. So according to this survey, more than half of all respondents have experienced a significant loss of productivity due to a technology failure. Can you talk about how much time is wasted in these outages?
Well, so first of all, companies are overwhelmed with the pace of change and the demands from the business and IT. So IT is overwhelmed, and keeping up with change, whether it's a new company that needs to grow and scale, relatively new organization that's starting greenfield with IT, or for the most part, it's existing organizations that have legacy systems and need to integrate and manage and maintain those systems. So from a point of view of productivity, what the survey found was that more than half, or 53% of Canadian companies, have experienced a significant loss of productivity due to failures of some sort, network, applications, data systems, et cetera. And nearly 40% of companies surveyed believe that their IT systems and processes are out of date and they require fundamental updates. So that's a huge risk element, and both of these factors combined add to the outages and productivity loss. So working with service providers and managed services providers reduces the risk and helps to offset some of that productivity loss.
What would you recommend as the top 3 ways to deal with an outage?
So there's a couple of ways. I mean, first of all, and the best way perhaps is to do everything possible to avoid outages and having a plan, and that plan includes backup and disaster recovery plan for their technology, but also business continuity. It's very important that organizations have that they back up their data, and that they have, as part of that plan, they look at companies such as managed services providers to do part of that. And more companies are leaning on experts such as ourselves for disaster recovery. And for example, we have cloud and managed hosting in country with backup facilities. So we can assure data residency and all of that in Canada. But I think the best way really is to avoid outages. And then after that is really to have a plan, and a plan that's tested and a plan that works. So we find that most organizations are doing that, but the question really is how can they do even more, and how can they explore what else is less value, what are the areas that outages could occur in their current environment, and what are the risk elements, and how can they offset some of that working with third-party managed service providers.
As we know, most companies are not comfortable in moving to a managed service provider. How can they overcome this sort of barrier?
Well, as a matter of fact, more and more companies are becoming comfortable with the concept of outsourcing, and they do it by workload, they do it by application. I think this is probably companies are probably more comfortable than we would think, and for example, with this the survey that was conducted, more than half, or 56% of respondents agree or strongly agree that an outsourcing relationship would free up their IT staff. So that's fairly significant. And then 2/3 were most interested in having a strategic relationship with a managed services provider. These are Canadian companies who are indicating that they're comfortable with leveraging third-party services and that they see the value of that. So is it ever going to be 100%? Probably not. But at the end of the day, it's really about achieving their business objectives. And that's the primary driver for this, is really how do they become more agile? How do they surround themselves with strategic partners who really can help them focus on they can focus on their core, which is managing infrastructure, and the organization can then focus on achieving their business objectives and their financial and technology objectives.
All right, for those who are listening, and if they'd like to know more about your services, where can they go to get more information on this?
Absolutely. So they can visit CenturyLink.ca.
Okay, great. Is there anything else you would like to add, Ash, before we close off?
No, I just like to say thank you, and thank you to you and your listeners, and we welcome the opportunity to talk to anyone who's interested in the services that we have to offer.
All right, great. Well, thanks, Ash, for joining us today and sharing more about managed services in Canada. We truly appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Companies are facing a lot of issues in managing their IT infrastructure. By moving to managed services, companies can be able to simplify their business and focus resources on growing their business, as Ash pointed out. From those surveyed as well, many companies have outdated technologies, and that is a risk factor that can be mitigated by migrating to managed services. As more and more companies become comfortable with outsourcing, they are seeing the value of investing into initiatives that can produce more and achieve their business objectives, rather than being bogged down with managing their IT infrastructure. If you're experiencing issues with your IT infrastructure, managed services would not be a bad idea to pursue. For more details on how to get a ball rolling, or to even gather more information, please visit CenturyLink.ca. Thanks again to our guest on today's show, Ash Mathur, Regional Vice President and Managing Director at CenturyLink Canada. Thank you for joining us today on WRLWND Radio. This is Marcello Sukhdeo saying stay safe in the technology whirlwind.